Welcome to Healing and Made Free with Janet Boynes Ministries. Thank you for listening. Janet will be talking about her struggle with addiction, alcohol, drugs, eating disorders, unwanted same-sex attraction, and living a homosexual life. Janet has survived all those things by the grace of God. Janet's not a doctor, she's not a therapist, she's not a psychotherapist, she's not a licensed counselor. Janet is an ordained pastor and wants to show you God's promises, how God has set her free, and how you can be set free. What He has done for her, He will do it for you. If healing and freedom are what you want, you have come to the right place at the right time. Let's get started. Here is Janet Boynes.
I have Erin with me today. Erin, welcome to Healing and Made Free.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. This is a real honor.
Erin, you have a powerful story, and not like others, but your own personal, because you dealt with it. Because it's called Healing and Made Free, I like to talk about things that people have been through and then how God helped you become whole in Him. You know, I tell people we don't ask people to come out of homosexuality, walk away from pornography, or detransition for us, but we want to see them walk in holiness.
Amen.
Amen. You know, just to really just dive right into it. And those of you that are listening and you have children or you're dealing with pornography, especially, please share this with a friend or a family member, because we know pornography is $1 billion industry. And I'm going to ask Erin a lot of questions on this issue because she has the answer for you. Erin, when you talk about trans identity, same-sex attraction, how does that connect to your pornography issues you were dealing with?
It's a really good question. And they're all kind of interconnected. I think that a lot of times people don't realize how a trans identity, same-sex attraction, promiscuity, prostitution, pornography, they're all part of the same kind of brokenness, is this sexual brokenness that many of us have. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes we'll resolve one area and it will come back in another area, because really the only way we can become fully healed is with God. And so for me, I was able to get therapy when I was a child to address my transgender identity. And then it kind of morphed into same-sex attraction. And over time that was addressed and resolved. But the core brokenness that I had really never got addressed. And so I continued to struggle with sexual brokenness up until really my late 40s, when I was saved by God. At the time, I was making a living making videos for Pornhub. And I am so thankful that God reached in and grabbed me and and just really pulled me from the pit of despair that I was in, because it's such a grim lifestyle to be in. I know a lot of times it's romanticized, but it was just it was living in a pit of despair, and I was considering taking my life. So I'm incredibly grateful that I had some beautiful women reflecting God's love to me, and really helped soften my heart so that God could finally reach me.
You know, you talked about the beginning and then you talked about the end, but I want to go focus on the middle. You said so much that it might have went over some of the people's heads. So I'm gonna back up a little bit. You talk about trans, you talk about same-sex attraction, you talk about pornography. What I've come to realize, if we don't get healing, we can go through one thing and then we'll wind up using something else as a Band-Aid, and then using something else as a Band-Aid until God gets a hold of us and we get the help that we need, go to professional counseling, and God changes us from the inside out. But you got involved with trans issues first. A lot of people think transgender is if you have gender reassignment surgery, or if you have your breast removed, or your bottom parts removed. That's not true, is it?
No, really, the way the trans ideology and the trans activists are suggesting that anybody who has an insistent, consistent, and persistent belief that they were born in they were born in the wrong body, that they're actually the opposite sex, is considered trans. And so, even though the word transgender wasn't around when I was a child, I was insistent and consistent and persistent that I was actually a boy. And so, by the language that they use and the definition that they use, I would have been considered a transgender kid.
And when we talk about transgender, I remember growing up, my brother who died of AIDS in 1999, he was gay, but we used to say he was Robert during the day and he was Barbara at night. We used to call that cross dressing. Only thing
Right.
they did today was just change the name of it. Is that correct? Is that what you did? Because I used to cross dress as well.
Well, I think there are all different kinds. We talk about transgender now as if it's all one thing, but there are actually many, many different types of people that fall under that umbrella. So for me, I had what would be considered gender dysphoria, which was an extreme hatred of my female body. And so for me, it wasn't about cross dressing, it was about escaping being female. I had been sexually assaulted when I was between kindergarten and first grade. And the result of that was me feeling like it was too dangerous to be a girl and shameful. And so, in my child's mind, somehow I came up with the idea that I was a boy, and that was a way to keep myself safe. So that's one kind of trans. And then there are gay men who just like to cross dress. That's another kind of trans. I have friends who never had any feelings of being born in the wrong body till they started puberty and were uncomfortable with the feelings of puberty, and then decided that the way to address that was to adopt a trans identity. And then there are some people called autogynephiles, and those are men who are sexually aroused when they dress up as women. So everything from a deep damaged child to a man who's using it as a sexual fetish, and that's all under the trans umbrella.
Yeah. Erin, you said so much about, what you decided to become at that time as a young child. What do you think caused you to not like who you were? Because in a way, the Bible says, I ordained you in the womb. God made us male. He made us female. There's two gender. We didn't have a choice in the matter. But something happens in our childhood that tells us I was born in the wrong body, or I don't like who you made me. What was it that caused you to be trans identity child or same sex attracted?
Well, I think a big part of it was that I grew up in a home where we didn't know Jesus. In fact, it was almost an anti-Jesus home. My mother was into the occult and into witchcraft. And so I really didn't have any sense of Jesus or God or that I was made to be valuable and beautiful. And so that was missing from my life. My parents divorced, and my mom said that my biological father didn't like me because I was a girl, that he wanted sons, not daughters. And then the sexual assault happened. And so I think the combination of all of those things just is sort of like I dissociated from being a girl. I was no longer wanting to be a girl because it seemed like being a girl was dangerous. It wasn't accepted. And that if I was a boy, that my life would be better. And so it was really just a coping mechanism for some really difficult things that I was going through as a kid.
Wow. I believe I just had my good friend David pick up on, who's a psychotherapist. And I know we talked about sexual assault. And 90% of women, I think it's higher, it's about 90% of women who struggle with homosexuality has been sexually assaulted. And we're close to 70% of young boys who had some type of sexual experience, whether seeing, books on porn or was sexually assaulted. Are those stats what you're hearing, or?
Yeah, and I'm seeing that with detransitioners too. So girls who adopted a trans identity and realized it was a mistake, and even among men, that early childhood sexual trauma is a huge factor in these, and it makes sense. For me, part of my trans identity was cultivating same-sex relationships. At the time, I was thinking I was having opposite sex relationships because I thought I was a boy, and
Right.
so me, it was actually part of my trans identity was being involved with girls. And once I sort of had that trans identity resolved, I did feel safer with girls. It felt much safer to be around girls. And up until probably near the middle of puberty, it just felt so much safer to be with girls because they didn't hurt me the way men did, and they felt safer. And so, and it really, it makes sense, that kind of sexual trauma. It just is such a profound brokenness, especially when it happens in childhood, and especially when it happens in a non-believer who doesn't know that there's a God out there who can help walk them through difficult times. Yeah, so I agree with David Pickup. I have a lot of respect for him. He's done some amazing work in understanding these triggers that, and what I think, what he talks about and what I see is that with the conversion therapy bans that they're talking about, which is how I actually got involved in this whole thing, was testifying against conversion therapy bans because therapy helped me as a child to overcome my trans identity. And they're trying to ban those. And essentially what that does is it protects perpetrators of sex crimes because therapy helps the child to identify what it was that caused the problem. Now that child doesn't get the help that they need, and it's likely the perpetrator will never be identified, and that sexual abuse or assault will never be identified as the cause of it.
Right. Wow. That is saying a lot. Erin, dealing with gender dysphoria, you had same-sex attraction, you're attracted to women, and somehow you went to pornography.
Yeah.
And I remember for me, I saw pornography one time, and I kid you not, I just thought I was going to barf all over the place. I mean, but for others, and I work with a lot of young men that are dealing with pornography, it's almost like cocaine for me. I took one sniff and I was addicted for a long time because sin will take you further than you want to go and keep you longer than you want to stay.
Yes.
In saying that, I'm sure the day that you looked at pornography, you never thought that you would do some of the things that you did based off of looking at pornography. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and it's still somewhat confusing to me when I look back on it. Really, I was like you to a large degree. I was kind of a prude. Didn't look at porn for most of my life. I didn't approve of it. I thought it was, harmful sexualization of women. But I went through a period where I was just really struggling. I feel like I was just sort of spiraling into sort of this, all kinds of really unhealthy behaviors. I was self-harming. I was having some problems with eating disorders. And so I went to a therapist, and therapist encouraged me to look at porn and said that it possibly could help me, and that orgasms were healthy and a good release, and that it might be really beneficial for my mental health. And so I started looking at pornography basically because I was just really struggling. And this is so your experience was immediate revulsion. My experience was, I wonder if I could do that. So rather than being really interested in watching pornography, I just had this idea of, I wonder if I could do that. And it's very confusing to me because I tend to be very shy. When I'm in locker rooms, I go in the stall to change. It's not like I'm an exhibitionist at all. But what I saw was that these women who were making the porn were getting all kinds of attention. And so I think that it was just a craving to be noticed and to be appreciated in some way. And so I made my first video. It was probably a day or two after I first looked at porn and uploaded it. And within seconds, I had men contacting me and saying, "You're beautiful. Will you do this kind of video for me? You're the most amazing woman I've ever seen." It was just flooded with compliments and appreciation, something I'd never had in my entire life. I am not the typical, I don't look like a typical porn star. Have a very small build. I am, I'm not, I sort of look like maybe a librarian. I tend to look like a porn star.
You really do. Look like a librarian.
Yeah. And that's sort of how I went through life, sort of timid. And so all of a sudden, just being flooded with this with these men complimenting me, was just amazing. And then I realized I could make money doing it, and I was like, wow. And I went and talked to my therapist about it, and he told me that making porn was kind of like being a social worker. And he actually told me, which I've learned after the fact isn't true, but he said that that if I were to perform sexual acts for men on porn, that they would be less likely to be sexual predators. So I felt like I was doing this public service. So I would dress up in, little kid outfits because I'm small. Oftentimes, I mean, I could kind of look like a little kid and act out these fantasies for men. And I really thought at the time that I was doing a public good. And at the same time, I'm having these men tell me, they love me, that I'm beautiful, that I'm the most amazing woman they've ever met. And it really was kind of intoxicating. I mean, it was probably a lot like drugs. It was just this, my system was just being flooded with endorphins. And there was something really exciting about when someone would make a request for a video, sort of figuring out how I was going to do it, and getting the props set up and making it, and then getting the instant affirmation. And I had over 10 million views on Pornhub. I mean, it was just this constantly being flooded with affirmation. But at the same time, I kept going further and further and further. And so I ended up doing things that were incredibly dangerous and incredibly harmful to my body. I think that I probably would have killed myself if I hadn't gotten out of it, because I was doing things that were so dangerous and so harmful. And I felt like I couldn't say no to the requests, but at the same time, I just felt like I was just dishonoring my body. And I just felt so dirty and so ashamed. And also this sense of, oh, what if I get caught? What if people find out? And because it went from, I wonder what would happen if I posted a video, to suddenly being one of Pornhub's top 20 amateur video makers within just about a month's time. And I had men who were saying, hey, could you make a video every day? So I had this pressure of, I'm going to make a video every day. I had over 400 videos when I was finally saved. And so it's just, and it really, it was like this spiral. And it's very much, I think, like what happens with drug addicts, that you think, I'll just try this. And the next thing you know, and I do think Satan just took over. He was like, here is someone I can just rake over the coals and pull deep down into the darkest sin possible.
Those of you that are listening, I'm talking with Erin Everitt, and she's talking about how she was involved in gender dysphoria. She had an eating disorder, involved in pornography, same-sex attraction. Erin, for those that are listening and saying, hey, I went through that, you're giving them hope.
Yes.
That change is possible no matter how low we go, that God's arms are wide enough to pull us out of that wickedness, to pull us away from Satan's arms. But we have to, be willing to do the work so we can be free. When you talk about Pornhub, and this might be a question that somebody's asked, it just came to my head. When you were dealing and you're uploading all these videos, you said you were dressing like a kid. It just came to my mind that no wonder some of these men go after our kids. I don't know what they like in our kids when they're so young to hurt them in such a way. It's just disgraceful, when I hear, because it's $1 billion industry. They're selling women, they're selling men, into what is it called? As sex slaves, and I'm grateful that you got out of there safely. I know of men and women who just go on these sites and out of the blue, not knowing the person, go have sex with them.
Yeah.
in
Well,
hotels, and a
yeah.
lot of them are married, Erin.
Yeah, and I guess
Most of the men have rings on.
right. I guess I was really blessed because I'm a germaphobe. And so I never I would never have felt comfortable doing that because of sexually transmitted infections. But you mentioned the children thing, and I can't tell you how many men requested that I wear ponytails, that I, put on, bobby socks, that I do jump
Wow.
rope, that I have lollipops or blow bubbles, things acting in, very childlike ways. It was very common to have requests like that. There were also just some just extreme behaviors. There were men who really liked to see something involving blood and pain, and
Mm-hmm.
had things that they had these fantasies that were just beyond demented, and perverse,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like they just were so excited that they came upon this woman who would go ahead and do the just crazy absurd things, for them. And again, I think part of it was the need that I had, but also going to a therapist who just kept kind of egging me on and encouraging me, telling me
Wow.
I was, this is a great career you've got going.
Right.
I think that was, a big part of the problem. So it's kind of interesting when I talk about therapists, because I had really good experiences with therapists when I was a child, and they walked me out of my transgender identity. But then as an adult, I had some, therapists that really did some tremendous damage. And part of it was that they weren't Christian. They weren't, their foundations weren't in with Jesus. And so the therapist I was seeing was a Unitarian Universalist moral relativist, who believed in critical theory and sort of,
Mm-hmm.
really embraced the idea that sex work is work, and that it was really impossible for people not to control their it was impossible for them to control their sexual urges. And so, Pornhub he viewed as being so much better because it prevented people potentially from going out and acting on the behaviors. But since I've gotten out of this, I've learned that actually people tend to keep increasing their
Mm-hmm.
behavior. So rather than helping to control it, something like Pornhub actually increases the risk and increases the likelihood of people acting out on their behaviors.
It's so sad, but it's still happening today where counselors encourage, transgenderism, homosexuality, and all these things,
Yeah.
and not thinking about the repercussions of what somebody's going to go through, because they're not going to be there after the fact when they, sue them and, need some help, because their mindset is, no, you're doing the right thing. Stay in that, keep doing that.
Yeah.
They were telling you back then, but for me to tell somebody they can change, they want to throw me in jail as the
Right.
bad guy.
And
It just doesn't make sense.
yeah, that's what is just astonishing to me is that, people are trying to pass laws to prevent us from being healthier, and to prevent us from finding that peace. And to me, that's just heartbreaking. I can't imagine. I mean, as crazy as my life turned out, um, with having had therapy as a child, I can't even imagine how much more confusing and complicated it would have been if I'd had somebody encouraging me to hold on to my trans identity and go through those medical procedures that are so damaging. I just can't even imagine what would have happened to me if I'd been put on that pathway. So I really feel like, even though I ended up, having some very difficult times in my life, I am so thankful to that therapist when I was in elementary school, who, refused to accept that I was a boy, who did not encourage me to embrace that identity at all.
Yeah.
So I have sort of mixed feelings about therapists at this point. I really
Yeah.
encourage people to find a Christian therapist if they're in need of
Yeah.
therapy.
Yeah, and I think that's important, because I know I had a therapist who encouraged me to stay in homosexuality. Erin, I want to ask you a question. Pornhub, do you ever worry or ever concerned that the things that you did with pornography will surface again?
Well, it's interesting because, I started speaking out about my trans identity, testifying at legislative hearings And as a result of that, became sort of a public figure, at least in my local area. And I started to worry that it was possible that people might come upon my porn and that it might be made public. And I sort of just lived with this anxiety about it. After I was saved, I realized that I needed to come clean with my children, which was incredibly difficult, and to be open about it, to be transparent about it. I think if you try and hide things from your past, they're more likely to come back and haunt you. Whereas I do, I have this fear that at some point somebody might post a video of me because at the time I didn't realize there was technology that people could download the videos that I was making. Now I realize that all of the videos, even though I deleted them on Pornhub, they're out there. They're out there. People are probably watching them. Somebody's probably making money off of them. But I feel like, and that's one of the reasons that I feel like I need to speak out about this. I don't want anybody else to struggle the way I did. If there's anybody out there watching this who's even thinking about going on Pornhub or any other porn site, I just want to warn them that you can go from a very sort of what seemingly innocent curiosity to being dragged down into the depths really fast. And so I feel like God has called me to talk about this, even though it is very hard. And it is very difficult to admit all of the things that I did and know that at any point somebody could bring this up and show it to me or show it to others, show it to my loved ones, potentially even send it to my children. That's really hard. But at the same time, I really feel like God healed me so much that how would it be if I didn't share and try to stop others from doing this? I feel like I'd be turning my back on the healing and the grace that God gave me. And I know that that Jesus forgave me. I know that I'm forgiven. And part of that beautiful gift that he's given me is hopefully the opportunity to help others.
I know every time we talk about our past, it just, we ask ourselves, man, how could we have done that? But when you're in a dark place and you don't get the love and attention that you're looking for, you're willing to go to any lengths to get it. I had an eating disorder for many years, and just a year ago, for over 30 years, I was purging. I'm just not getting help for it. I realized that if I don't get help, it's going to kill me. And that was the last thing that I had hidden. And now I'm talking about it to everybody. Everybody wonder how I stay so skinny. And that was how. The hard thing for me is all the size 4 and the size 6s that I was wearing a year ago, I had to give all my clothes away because I don't know if I'll get back to that. Now I don't care how expensive the suit is. It's like a size 12, and it's like a 12, you know what I mean? But people are like, but you don't look like a 12. You still look like you're a 4. But still, mentally, emotionally, these are things we have to work through. But that's why we have a testimony to be able to help other people. And thank God for Jesus Christ, our Lord, God, and Savior, who will redeem the time. We can't get back all the things that we've done. We can't take it back, but we know he'll redeem the time. We know that he'll take our stories, he'll take your story, and thousands of others out there who have been through what we have been going through and the things we've done to help other people. And so I am so appreciative and grateful that your heart is so open to help those that are lost in these particular areas. And I'm so glad also that your children know, because somebody would really like to destroy you by telling your children before you had an opportunity to tell your own story. How, when did the Lord start your healing process?
Well, it was interesting. As I said, I used to be about as far left as you can imagine. I volunteered.
I can't imagine. Yeah. I really can't.
I volunteered for Planned Parenthood. I was a Bernie Sanders delegate in 2016. I really was I was totally pro-choice, totally into LGBT rights. And so I learned about the conversion therapy legislation because I used to donate to Equality Utah, which is the Utah arm of the LGBT activist group. And so I used to be a donor to them because I supported all of, So when I started speaking out about my story, because I realized most people didn't know that children can overcome trans identity, and that usually it's the result of some kind of significant trauma. And so as I started speaking out about it, and there were some people from the Eagle Forum, which is a Christian conservative group that I grew up hating. Anytime anybody from the Eagle Forum was on TV, my mother would just curse at them. So I thought that they were the bad guys. So when they invited me to come and speak at an event in Washington, D.C., and I said, well, I need you to know that I don't agree with you on anything else other than this transgender thing. So I'll talk about that, but you need to know I don't agree with you on anything else. They said, that's fine. Come, we really want to hear your story. And when I was there, I met just the most amazing, beautiful women that I really believe were reflecting God's love to me. And when I was there, I just started feeling dirty and ashamed. And I thought, if they knew I was making a living, making videos for Pornhub, they wouldn't want me here. I was convinced that they would just tell me to leave. And so I met with a group of them that I'd gotten close to and confessed what I had been doing. And instead of telling me to leave, they just loved me. They held me. They told me they loved me and they wanted me to stay. And then they shared some of the gospel with me, which I've never heard before. And one of them said, Erin, I know that you don't believe in God, but you need to know he believes in you. And I came home from that conference and I was sitting on my bed and just had a sense of I had a big decision to make. I could follow the devil and die, or I could accept Jesus into my heart and live. And I'm so thankful that he came after me and he softened my heart. He brought those people into my life. And so that was in September 2019. And since then, he's blessed me so much, Janet. I can't even tell you how he just brought me into the light. It was like he just was holding me the whole time, walking me away from my past life. He brought new people into my life. He brought friends. He really gave me a whole new family and mentors to help me to understand and learn. And I just feel overwhelmingly blessed by God, and every day just wake up thanking Jesus for coming into my life and really recognizing that I was that lost sheep that he came after, and kept coming after me. I suspect my whole life he was coming after me. It just took me a while to realize it. And so I think one of the things that I recognized after I'd been saved for a while was the fact that I was actually actively pushing Jesus away from me, because I grew up in this home where Christianity was vilified, and where my mom really was into sort of some of the occult stuff. It scared me so much. The whole idea of Satan scared me so much that I thought, well, if I just don't believe in Satan or Jesus or God or anything, if I'm just an atheist, I don't have to worry about it. So I was really actively maintaining an identity of being an atheist. So now I recognize that really the only identity that matters is being God's precious daughter. And I am so thankful that he has been able to just fill me with such conviction and again, just such blessings. The next day after I accepted Jesus, I went and deleted every single video I made on Pornhub. I had no idea what I was going to do to make a living. I was terrified because I had burned a lot of bridges speaking about my trans identity. I lost a lot of friends because of that, and burned a lot of bridges. And now here I was coming out as Christian, and I thought, oh no, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I'll possibly survive this. And shortly after that, I got a call from somebody who had made a video about my trans identity. Sharon Slater from Family Watch International called me, and she was just kind of going over some of the logistics of releasing the video. And right in the middle, she said, Erin, do you need a job? I feel like God's telling me to offer you a job.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
And so,
It's so funny before you go on, because the love of God will draw one to repentance. And that's what I believe in. Regardless what you walk like, talk like, look like, we should draw people to God, not push them away. And I tell people that in the church, if a man comes into your life and he had transitioned and he's in church, he might not look like a man, he might not talk like a man, but he has given up his, sexuality. He's, serving God. He's doing all the things, or she, that he or she is supposed to do as a Christian, but we reject them instead of loving on them, because as I hung out with, heterosexual feminine women, I want to be more like them. You know what I mean? So God will give you a community and a family so you can be around people that you want to be more like.
right.
Erin, and coming to a close, I want to talk about, before we close out and before you give your information on how people can reach you if they want to talk with you, or if they want to have you come speak. What are you doing now? What has the Lord done for you right now? What do you do for a living?
Well, I still work for Family Watch International, which has just been an incredibly amazing job. As I said, when I was telling the story, when I went to that Eagle Forum to talk about transgender issues, I didn't agree with them on anything else. And I feel like the scales really fell off my eyes. I started to recognize one of the messages God gave me about abortion, because I was really grappling with it, because I'd been so pro-choice. And I felt like God just said to me, Erin, is it okay to kill someone based on their age and location? And I was like, no. So it's like God just sort of took those scales from my eyes, and now I'm very much in alignment with them. And I've run into people like you who had former same-sex attraction and have come out of it. So I really just feel a very strong conviction of needing to adhere to biblical truth. And one of the things that I'm doing is I'm president of an organization called Advocates Protecting Children, which is the whole goal is to stop the medical transitioning of children. And that's been really powerful. I'm also currently in the Colson Fellowship Program, which has been really powerful to help me learn more about sort of the underpinnings of Christianity and learn more about how to share the gospel with people in a loving and compassionate way, but also uphold that truth.
Wow. What you're doing right now is amazing. And a lot of people don't realize that the work that we do comes with some consequences. There are people who don't like us, call us out our names, say they wish we were dead. But I know that in these end times, which I believe we're in the end of the end times, that God is going to expedite the work that we do. More people are going to come out of that life, and Satan is not going to have his hook in them. If somebody wants to have you come speak or reach out to you, how do they reach you, Erin?
You can go to the website advocatesprotectingchildren.org, and there's a way to reach us. It's even just the email advocatesprotectingchildren@gmail.com will get an email to me. And I'm also on Facebook and the others. And I don't know, is it Twitter or X or whatever it is?
It's Instagram, TikTok.
I'm actually not on Instagram and TikTok. I'm just on. Yeah, I really pulled back on my social media because I realized that it just wasn't healthy. And I'm working really hard to stay as close to God as possible. And I felt like some of that stuff it just was easy to just spend way too much time on that and not enough time serving God.
Well, Erin, I just want to thank you for being on Healing and Made Free with Janet Boynes. Those of you that are listening, please share this with someone. I know you know somebody that was dealing with gender dysphoria or homosexuality or pornography, which is $1 billion industry. I know so many people that I am going to share this video with when it comes out on YouTube or on my podcast. Erin, God bless you. And I so much appreciate you. Thank you again.
Well, thank you for what you're doing, Janet. It's really powerful and important work.
Thank you for listening to Healing and Made Free with Janet Boynes. Acts 10:34 says, God is no respecter of persons. God doesn't play favorites. which means what he has done for Janet, what he has done for guests on this show, he will do for you too. If you are struggling with anything, do not hesitate to reach out to Janet Boynes Ministries. They will do their best to help you any way they can. Go to the website, janetboynesministries.com. Janet loves you, and most importantly, God loves you. Have a blessed day.